brief.
I'll be brief, Ezra. Ezra, I am from Montreal. I am a graduate of McGill University. And when the issue of Trinity Western Unit came out, I investigated it a little bit. And I just want to tell you, graduates and future graduates, and past graduates perhaps of Trinity Western University, that I, as a graduate of McGill University, I am shamed. I am so shamed and embarrassed by the history of my alma mater to deny men. They would have denied you, they would have denied your father, they would have denied anybody in this room, going back in the early years, the opportunity to become a lawyer, the opportunity to become a doctor. That is unforgivable. Unforgivable, and I am so ashamed. As a graduate of McGill University, I cannot even begin to tell you. And I applaud your efforts. Trinity Western University deserves its law school. It deserves it.
Go ahead.
Ezra, you talked a little bit about Trinity and hoping and praying that they will continue this fight. They did fight, and they did win the BC Teachers certification. That is a precedent for the Supreme Court that they'll have to answer. However, I wonder if you could explain how financial institutions across this country have banded together in their opposition. You've talked about the law schools, you've talked about lawyers, and can you tell us how what possible motivation could the financial institutions have to blacklist Trinity Western graduates?
You know, I'm glad you reminded me of that. And I do remember seeing something about that by some VP legal, and I didn't follow up. So I'll have to. I remember seeing that. Was it Bank of Montreal or something like that?
Oh my God!
I'm gonna. You know what?
I'll get it.
And you just reminded me of that. But that. I mean, again, I don't believe. I think human rights commissions are unfair. I don't think that a Christian would ever get a fair shot. I gave you the example of the HMV record store. So I would actually never recommend that a Christian go to the Human Rights Commission. You'll only waste your time and money, and you'll lose, and that'll be a negative precedent or whatever. But in a real court, if a Christian were denied a job at a bank in such a brazen way, well, that's a whole different thing. And I think sometimes you have these social justice warriors within large companies. At PayPal, it was actually their CEO himself. But I think within large companies, especially in their PR departments, you have people who go on these causes. And because they get positive feedback. Because their friends at fancy Toronto cocktail parties say, right on. And because they never hear from the commons. And I think that goes to my point about the Christian pastors being so meek in Nanaimo, and Christians generally being reluctant to engage. And I think that if a company, whether you put aside PayPal, but if a bank actually, or a bank or any company did something that was brazenly anti-Christian, or on the face of it, they admitted that it was anti-Christian. And if Christians who still have numbers in Canada were to focus their feedback in a measurable way, quit your bank account and move to this bank. Here's an easy here's a website called quitthetdbank or whatever, .com. Follow these 3 steps. Email us, we'll help you, or whatever. Here's our hotline. Email the VP of the bank. Email, like if you had a very easy to use, user-friendly thing, and Facebook page and Twitter, and maybe you had a community opinion leader. I don't know where Jim Pattison is on these matters, but if he had a big shot who had a few bucks, and he said, hey, guess what, my bank of 20 years, you got to reverse that, or I'm moving to the next bank who's been after my business for 10 years anyway. So if you had a role model, get some news, snowball starts to roll, and then I think then these banks would see that there's another side of the story, and that they should maybe get back to the business of banking rather than the business of virtue signaling to social justice activists. I believe in treating everyone okay. I believe in treating everyone equally under the law. I don't believe in picking on anyone, and I don't think Trinity Western does either. That's the irony here, is the picking on is coming from the other side. And it suggests to me that some progressive social activists, it wasn't just about achieving legal equality for themselves. And it wasn't even just about achieving acceptance and normalcy for themselves. It was about vengeance against ideas they disagreed with. Perhaps they had a bad experience as a kid at Catholic school. Perhaps they didn't like a nun. Perhaps there was some daddy issues. I don't know. But it becomes clear to me that so many progressive social justice warriors are not satisfied with mere formal equality or legal equality. The idea of blacklisting a Christian law school shows an aggressive purging of Christians that goes far beyond equality for other groups and into a vengeance and a normalization of antipathy that is alarming to me as a Jew. All right, let's take 2 more questions. Go ahead.
First off, just want to thank you for coming. Also, I asked my parents if they had any questions. They said no, but just tell them that we really support them and he hopes he continues the Rebel media.
Well, right on, thank you.
All right, so I gotta check my facts here first. So a couple of years ago, I believe you were sued for defamation. I believe it was that imam that was preaching the beating of the wife. Is that correct?
You know what? You're conflating a few things. You're mixing a few things.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's okay. Keep going.
Okay. Anyways, well, shoot, that kind of ruins my question.
There was an imam named Syed Sohrawardi who took me to the Human Rights Commission.
Yeah.
He also filed a Law Society complaint against me. There was another Muslim leader who sued me in defamation. There was another Muslim group that took me to the Human Rights Commission, and now there are 2 more Muslim lawyers who are suing me in defamation. So I keep the lawyers busy.
Anyways, I believe one of them you lost. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right, and it's basically my question is how, because it seemed like a pretty open and shut case.
Well, you know what? Defamation law is a law that I've thought a lot about over the years. If someone were to falsely say, you stole from me, you stole from the company, you stole from, that could devastate someone's reputation if it was false. And I can understand why someone would want to be able to go to court to prove that was wrong and maybe get compensation. I get that, and I think I believe in that in certain cases. If someone made a terrible false factual allegation against you, I get it. But in Canada, our defamation law, because we don't have the First Amendment here, goes much beyond protecting people from false facts. It goes to uncomfortable opinions and comments. And I was a lawyer until I recently, actually I haven't practiced law in about 10 years, but as a lawyer, I had 26 complaints filed against me, 26 ethics complaints, all based on politics. The first 24 were dismissed without even a hearing, and the last 2 were thrown out without even being considered. So 26 out of 26, I won, but each one of those 26 complaints against me cost me money, thousands of dollars. Just think about that, because we don't have a First Amendment here. And so, like human rights commissions, defamation law, these are political tools to attack opponents. And it's lawfare. It's lawfare, using the law as a political weapon. And you sometimes see it when a big company sues a little person and overwhelms. There's a phrase, slap suit, strategic litigation against public participation, a slap suit. That was that movie Aaron Brockovich was about, I think. So I believe, and look, 26 Law Society complaints, probably 20 defamation claims, human rights complaints. I mean, I have had 50 legal actions against me. I think I've lost 2. You throw enough mud at the wall, and you know, I think that our judges in Canada tilt to the left. Let me give you an example. Carrie Simpson,
Right.
Rafe Mayer. So Rafe Mayer goes on CKNW and says Carrie Simpson was like Adolf Hitler or the brown shirts or something else. I forget exactly what he said, because she was worried about the school curriculum. I forget the exact words that Rafe Mayer said about her. I think it was sort of an implication that she was a Nazi or a Klansman or something. So she sued him. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, but because she's a socially conservative Christian woman and he's sort of a hipster lefty, I don't even know how to describe him, he won. I cannot think of a single defamation case in Canada where a conservative sued a liberal for bad-mouthing him. I'm the conservative one. I can't name one. On the other hand, I can think of a great number of defamation cases where a liberal sued a conservative and the liberal won. And I mean, is this conspiracy theories? Am I whining about being bad? I didn't talk about it till you raised it. I don't think I lead with this story. I think that in Canada, if you're a conservative, if you're a Christian, you pay a tax, a legal tax. Because the other side, the activists are in the law societies, they're in the law schools. Why do you think they wouldn't be in the law courts? And I mean, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, I know that. I say tough things every day. I say rough things every day. And there's some judges who don't like the cut of my jib. We don't have that same lawfare approach to the other side, and I don't think we should, by the way. I don't think we should. But I think we should start speaking out and pushing back, at least politically. I am not advising that we launch a lawfare campaign against anyone. I'm pointing out that the other side does, and at the very least, we should push back. Whenever I lose, and I lose once in a while, and it hurts, but I remind myself that no one shoots at a dead duck. All right, take one more question. Go ahead.
I don't have a question, I have an answer.
Oh, okay.
My God says, if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray, give up their wicked ways, search me out, I will hear from heaven, and I will heal your land. I happen to be on the board of Trinity Western for the first 10 years. I've been praying for Trinity ever since it was formed. And it's had lots of battles. And we've prayed through them. And now, if Trinity wants this law society to be successful, all they have to do is pray passionately. Get down. Let the president of this college, this university, advertise across Canada and ask the Christians to pray. In Amos 7, God says he was fed up with Israel. I'm going to do away with them. And evidently only Amos was there. And he prayed. He said, oh God, Israel is so small, they got no friends. Please don't do it. And the next verse says, God says, okay, I won't do it. And 2 verses down, they didn't change. So Amos, and God says, oh, I'm going to burn everything up. And so Amos started to pray again. Oh Lord, Israel is so small. They don't have any friends. Please don't do it. Next verse says, okay, Amos, I won't do that. Now I'll tell you, you didn't mention about prayer. I'm the founder of Prayer Canada. I've been at it for 39 years. And I never had any legal operation come against me until last December. But 3 weeks before that happened, I was at a conference, and there was a lawyer there. I didn't know it till he came.
You need a lawyer detector.
And so these leaders and one, and the fella who put the conference on was a friend of mine. He said, Artie, I want you to come and bring your book. A lady has published my biography for over 96 years. And so I brought my book, and in the interim periods, people would come over and talk to me about my book. And this one guy said, I want your book. He said, I'm a retired lawyer. I never heard of a retired lawyer. But anyway, he said, he's a retired lawyer. And he bought my book. 2 days later, he phones me. He says, Arnie, I read your book. I got home and opened it, and I never quit reading it till I read the whole thing. And the Lord's been telling me for the last 2 years that I'm to be joined up with an organization just like yours. So I'm your man. Anytime you need me, let me know. I thought everything was fine.
Arnie, I want to interrupt you just because I want to get some more questions in.
3 weeks later, I had a lawyer, a litigation lawyer, a freshman from Vancouver, send me a challenge, and so I just phoned my friend, and he has now come against them, and they are having to answer to me now.
First of all, I love your pep. Second of all, congratulations, or as my people say, mazel tov, on your work and your commitment to Trinity Western.
Yes.
And I'm going to go to you for your question in 1 second. Third of all, Arnie, it's nice to meet you. I take your point about prayer, but it wasn't prayer that answered the litigation against you. It was your Christian lawyer friend filing a pleading in response. Prayer in itself, you know, that's, as Stalin said, how many divisions does the Pope have? Now there's an answer to that. There's a Christian answer to that. But I guess my response, and I know I'm a Jew, so I don't know the Christian thinking, but I would say prayer enough isn't going to win the court case. Prayer enough is not going to stop the VP of the bank. Prayer alone, is not enough to let the politicians know that they're off balance. So prayer may clarify your mind and your heart. It may unlock within you the right motivations. It may express to a higher power your fondest hopes. But without action, I believe that Trinity Western will lose. That's my view. You may disagree.
It says faith without works is dead.
I mean, and I don't want to get into a theological debate because I'm going to lose. And I come from a different tradition. And I'm not, you know what Churchill said? He said, I'm not a pillar of the church, I'm a buttress. I support it but from the outside. That's what Churchill said. I'm more of a buttress of the church than a pillar of the church. There's room for prayer. Absolutely. And don't think the other side doesn't pray. They just pray to different things, Arnie. They pray to different things. Some of them pray to themselves. They're their own gods. Some of them pray to false things. The other side does more prayer. The fervor in environmental secular activists would make a Pentecostal church look modest. Would you agree with that? Don't think the other side is not motivated by what they regard as a holy cause. So yes, but you've got to match it with action. That's my own view. Let's take one last question, then we'll wrap it up.
I have a question regarding a statement you issued recently about the plight of a PR person from the UK who recently was arrested on suspicion of inciting racial violence.
That's right.
And then released without being charged.
Yes.
He tweeted on March 23rd, I confronted a Muslim woman yesterday in Crowden. I asked her to explain Brussels. She said, nothing to do with me. A mealy-mouthed reply. Later the same day, he tweeted, who cares if I insulted some towel head? Question mark, really, period. So if you don't feel it's wrong, or if you feel we should defend someone who is painting an entire group of people, specifically a religion, with the same brush, and counting them as all responsible from the actions of one group of extremists within that group, how are we defending Christians against that same prejudice? Should we be responsible for Christian extremists, such as the gunman that shot up Planned Parenthood in Colorado?
First of all, I appreciate your question very much. That's my favorite question of the night. I'm going to answer it fully, and I'm going to ask you to come back one more time because I'm going to take some time now. So I want to give you a chance to come back if you think I've raised something or been unfair. I want to also compliment you on the courage for challenging me as opposed to just applauding me. I get too much applause. So let me take, and I've read both of those tweets. So just for those who didn't hear it, there was some fella in London, which is a PR man, who wrote on Twitter that he accosted just some woman on the street who he thought was Muslim. I don't know, maybe she was wearing a hijab. And said, can you explain Brussels, the terrorist attack? And she said, nothing to do with me. So let me make a few observations. Number one, he did not attack her physically. It doesn't seem like he insulted her or picked a fight with her. It sounds like he asked someone a question based on how that he thought they were Muslim, and she said, nothing to do with me. And that seems like the end of the incident from that one tweet. I'll deal with the second one in a minute. Now, is it fair to ask a Muslim, what do you say about Brussels? It's a tough question, because Brussels was done in the name of Islam. The people who did it call themselves the Islamic State. They're led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who's got a PhD in Islamic theology. Who are we to say he's, not everyone holds that is Islam, but he's got 200,000 terrorists, according to the latest estimate by the Kurdish authorities. That is Islam. Thank God that's not all Islam, but that's Islam. So if there's someone who's wearing a flag of Islam, a hijab, to ask them to comment on it, is that socially rude? Maybe. Of all the spectrum of responses, I'd say that's probably healthier than 99% of other things. I mean, you could just not talk about it, but when 30 people are blown up in the name of Allah, after we had 500 people murdered or injured in Paris in November, after we had 50 murdered or injured, it's endless. Is it legitimate to ask someone about a doctrine? Islam is not a race. Islam is a religion, it's a philosophy, it's a political doctrine. Is it fair to ask someone who's flying that flag what they think about it? I mean, it's fair. Is it rude? Maybe. But what happened? So that would I do that tweet? Would I accost someone on the street and say answer for Brussels? I personally wouldn't. But of all the things that a fella can do, okay, a social interaction and engagement on the street, she says none of my business, or whatever she said. It's actually not a bad answer. It's an okay, she could have answered 10 different ways, it's an acceptable answer. But what was he charged with? Section 19 of the Public Disorder Act, which says that, and the cops arrested him, took him into the cop shop for a few hours. The charge was not that he was mean to this gal, or it may not have even happened, frankly. I don't know. The charge was that by tweeting about it, he was inciting racial hatred, as if Islam is a race. So the tweet itself, writing those 140 characters, was the alleged crime according to the cops. Read the Public Disorder Act. That's the crime, is saying something that would stir up hard feelings. That's the crime. That is not a real crime. I'm sorry, that's not a crime. Not in a free country, it's not. And if you watched that show, and it sounds like you did, and thank you for watching it, I also talked about a Dutch teacher who tweeted that the Muslim students were cheering. So this Dutchman tweets that the Brussels attack, there was cheering of Muslim students. 3 cops came to his door, if you watch my show on that. 3 cops. And what did they say? Don't say that. Don't tell people that. And why would you send a cop? And why would you send 3? Well, how would you feel if 3 cops came to your door and said, don't say that? The cops. Are you going to arrest me if I do or don't? Are you going to go to jail? Are you watching me? You're watching me. So that is not, we do not send cops to people. Flip it around. If someone tweeted something anti-Christian, imagine if a cop arrested them, like in London. Imagine if 3 cops showed up to the door of a teacher. It's unthinkable, first of all. Now you talk about the second tweet by this Brit who used the phrase towel head, which is disparaging. It's not, I could think worse words, but.
I'd say it's a slur.
Yeah, I'd say it's a slur too. Okay, you know what? If we're gonna start dispatching cops anytime someone makes an insult, we're gonna need a few more cops and a few more jails. And if you watch my show on that, I was ambiguous as to whether or not that first tweet was the right thing to do. And I didn't refer to the second one because my point was the first one. As I said 10 minutes ago, there are rude things all the time. There are reasons to be aggrieved all the time. And the proper response is name and shame. And this guy was named and shamed. He made the newspapers all around the world, didn't he? Number 2, teachable moments. Okay, now some people actually agree with them. Other people oppose them. Other people say, well, there's an issue there. Is this terror being done in Islam? And the third is, be a citizen about it. Don't be a 911, call the WAMbulance, government, make a federal case out of it. So I think that someone can be rude and even racist or whatever without it being a criminal event. And always swap in Christian and say, how would you feel if it, and that's, when I publish the Danish cartoons of Mohammed, is there a cartoon of Jesus in a newspaper in Canada every day? Yes. Is it flattering? No. Usually not. Do cops show up? Do publishers get put through 900 days of prosecution? No, because we live in a country with freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. And Christians, they don't like it, but they don't sue or blow things up. You mentioned a Christian going into, and your second point, I'm almost done, and I'll let you have a little counterpoint. You mentioned a Christian going and shooting an abortion clinic. There have been a number of how many of those do you think there's been?
5.
Crimes by extremist Christians?
Yeah.
Quite a few.
I think there's quite a few.
5 or 6.
5 or 6 sounds about right. There's been about 500 or 600 movie of the weeks done on them. I know that. The Law and Order episodes. I think they're magnified because of the reason you raise it as a counterpoint to Islamic Jihad. The number of there may be people who commit murder in the name of any religion. But Steve Saylor says political correctness is the art of not noticing things. And it's pretty hard not to notice that 99% of terrorist attacks are from one, or in the name of one religion. I can name you, in the last month, 5 Muslim terrorist attacks of 30 casualties or more. Ankara, Turkey, the Iraqi soccer game, Brussels #1 and Brussels #2. So that's 4 in the last 30 days. That's right, the Easter, the Loughrin Easter. So that's 5.
Oh, yes.
And if you read the Quran, which I encourage you to do, you will see that it is a document that proposes jihad, that talks about making everyone Muslim by force if necessary. And you cannot deny that there is an essence of jihad in the book, because there are dozens of Muslim terrorist groups pointing to the Quran as inspiration. I've read the New Testament and the Old Testament, and there are some bloody portions of them, and indeed, in centuries past, Christianity did have its bloody moments. But we're in 2016, and Christianity is not a religion of the sword. And neither are the Jews, and neither are the Hindus, and neither are the Sikhs, and neither are the Zoroastrians, and neither are Yazidis. And once in a blue moon, is there some person who does so in the name of Christianity? Yes. Does every Christian immediately say that is unchristian? Well, yeah, it's so assumed. I saw a poll by the Pew public policy pollsters, liberal-leaning, very good reputation pollsters. Have you ever heard of Pew, P-E-W?
Yeah.
Asking large sample sizes in different Muslim countries, do you support the Islamic State? And in some countries, support is more than 20%. And in some countries, it's as low as 5%. Well, in a country as big as Indonesia, 250 million Muslims, 5% supporting the Islamic State, that's high. That's a lot. Do you think, what percent of Christians do you think support terrorism in the name of Christianity? 1 in a million? Not even. That would mean there's 300 in the United States. Oh. So that's my long reply. Why don't you give me a counterpoint?
Well, regarding equipping Christianity with Islam and looking at it from that position, I would say that I think it's important to keep in mind the wave of anti-Muslim hate crimes in Europe, specifically Western Europe, but all over Europe, especially France, since the terror attacks in France. And that the reality is, I think there's a high risk of inciting racial hatred in those countries particularly right now, but really all over the globe against Islamic people. And I think it's important to note too that Matthew Doyle did not identify that woman as a Muslim by confirming that she was a Muslim. He identified her on sight.
Well, if you're wearing a hijab, which I imagine, it was, I mean, all we know is the 140 characters. If you're wearing a hijab, you're a Muslim. That's who wears hijabs, right? I mean, does anyone else wear a hijab or a niqab?
But religious headgear is often mistakenly all grouped into Islam. I can think of 3 people I know offhand easily, Sikh people who've been misidentified as Muslim before. I just think that we need to address that. That's a risky situation.
You know, I enjoy this conversation, and I would continue it with you. I will, and I don't want to have a 10-to-1 time imbalance, because that's not fair. But let me just close by saying there are 23 Arab countries. There are 57 Muslim countries in a Saudi-led group called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. There's a quarter of the world's countries are Muslim, a quarter. There is no anti-Muslim genocide anywhere. There is no Adolf Hitler who says, I want to kill every Muslim. There's not. There are no towns being mass slaughter of others. Just aren't. There are no mass waves of anti-Muslim terrorism. And frankly, Islamophobia, fear of Islam, I think that Islam, if you read the Quran, it is terrifying, if you take it literally.
Recently?
Pardon me?
Have you read the Old Testament recently?
Yeah, I mean, that's my point. And if you had slaughters every week in the name of the Old Testament, we might have a problem there. But that hasn't happened, if ever, in millennia. The entire Spanish Inquisition killed fewer people than a single mass casualty attack these days. I think that listen, I don't want to bring, I met Geert Wilders once. He's the leading politician in Holland. And he made a distinction for me that I've always remembered, and I'll close on this. What's your name?
Ben McGill.
Nice to meet you, Ben. Thanks for coming today, and thanks for asking a contrarian questions. Very valuable. Wilders said, I'm against Islam, and I'm for Muslims. I said, what do you mean? He said, Islam is the doctrine of philosophy. I can hate any ideology, I can hate an idea, but if a person is before me, I can at least be neutral to them. I can love them. I can even want to tell them what their faith says that they may not know about. I'm against the ideology. I'm for the person. And I didn't really think of it that way until he put it that way. And I find that helpful. And I always try and keep in mind Muslims who I personally know and like and rely on. So when I talk about these subjects, I sort of imagine my Muslim friends sitting there. Would I be comfortable saying these things if they were right there? And the answer is yes. Because I also want to be comfortable with myself. And so I feel comfortable speaking out against the misogyny of too much Islam, the true gay bashing, the anti-Christian genocide that's wiping out Arab Christians. We forget. Egypt used to be a Christian country. Now it's got a 10% Christian Coptic minority. Constantinople used to be the largest city in the world, the richest city in the world, the most Christian city in the world. Now it's called Istanbul. And the Hagia Sophia, which was the greatest church, became a mosque, and now it's a museum. And you talk about Europe, those people in Europe, and I was just in Europe a couple months ago. I spent 5 days talking to Muslim migrants. That's all I did for 5 days. Don't think that Europe can't become like Egypt or Constantinople. Why? Why could it not? Why is it morally stronger than Byzantium or Constantinople? Is it militarily stronger? Is it politically stronger? Is it more self-confident? Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, does not believe in a German future. She has no children herself. There's this video clip I show all the time on the channel of her being handed a German flag, looking at it and throwing it away with disgust. And I believe that there's some psychotherapy, guilt over the Holocaust. Oh, how we treated the Jews. Let's swap 6 million Jews for 20 million Muslims, and maybe in the karmic balance we can make up for it. I truly believe there's something psychological going on. Let me close with an anecdote from when I was in Malmo. I went to Malmo, Sweden. Malmo, it's about 40% Muslim now. There's a large neighborhood called Rosengard that's about 95% Muslim. I spent the day there just talking to everybody. Why are you here? Where did you come from? What do you do? What do you think of separation of mosque and state? What do you think about the Swedish ideas of equality of women? What do you think of gays? What do you think about two gay men holding hands? What do you think of being able to drink alcohol? What do you like? I just spent the day talking to people. And that night I went to the Malmo library just to meet somebody. And there was a huge poster that said, "Refugees welcome in Malmo." It said that in English. Huge sign. And I walked up to the librarian, and I made an unreasonable request. I said, do you have a room I can use to do a TV interview? Like, it was 10 minutes to closing. And I didn't call in advance. And it's a library, it's not a TV studio. It was a ridiculous request by me. And she said, no, sorry, we're almost closing. You didn't call in advance. It's for a library. We can't help you. And I was sort of jokey, and I had told them I was from Canada. It was sort of obvious. And I turned away to go. And very lighthearted, like I wasn't being mean at all, I was making a self-deprecating joke. I said, oh, I thought you guys welcome refugees. Like, it was a dumb little joke about how I needed a place to stay. Like, it was stupid, it wasn't funny. But I said it with a smile, and I was turning away to go, oh, I thought you guys welcome refugees. Because the signs were everywhere. And I said that, and it was like I put a dagger in her heart. And she said, stop, come back. Let me meet my manager. Let me see if I can find you a room. I said, no, I'm not, I'm from Canada. I'm not, you know, I was just joking. No, stop, I swear. She went to get her man, they had a meeting. There was a lineup now, because they weren't talking to anyone, they weren't checking out books now. They were, because I made this joke, and she knew that I knew that she knew I wasn't a refugee. But she thought that I might think that she didn't care about refugees because of this joke. So she went, and the whole staff in the Malmo library, true story, had this like 15, and they were making phone calls. I just pretend, it was a dumb joke. I am not a refugee. What is going on here? What was that about? That is about, especially in Sweden, that was neutral in World War II, that was Nordic and Aryan, and a guilt about not getting involved in World War II, and Hitler looked up to them as this. This is a psychological thing where they are trying to, there's something screwy going on over there. And I met a guy in Malmo. I said, where are you from? He said, from Somalia. I said, but he works in Vienna. I said, well, what are you doing here? He said, my wife and 5 kids are here in Malmo while I'm in Vienna. I said, I was going to ask him if he had another wife, but I didn't want to fight. He said, we went to Austria, Germany, I think he said France, Switzerland, and Sweden gave us the biggest house. So that's why we're in Sweden. We get the biggest house and the most stuff here. Sorry, that's not an Islamophobic country. We've gone off on a tangent there. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for your questions. I'm a little tuckered because I'm on Toronto time. Yeah. It's midnight out east. I'm going to say thanks for your hospitality. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Keep up the fight, you guys. I will see you another day.